host, Andrew Ingram, and every week I sit down with a different artist to talk about the things they make and why they make them. This is a fun one. This is Wade Ridley, everybody. He's a great comedian. Works Loonies Comedy Corner all the time. Done a lot of touring, a lot more touring than most of us local comics here in Colorado Springs. He's got a great podcast called The Watchmen. You should check that out. And he's just a good dude with we get into it. A lot of anger, a lot of rage, a lot of, like me, a lot of anti-authoritarian, leanings. I dig it. And one of my favorite comics to watch here in town. Check out all his stuff. Next time he has a show, go see it. As for my stuff, you know the deal. Rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Just fucking do it. It's the only way this thing grows. I need you guys. I need you to do it. Do it for my podcast. Do it for any other podcast you listen to. It helps us out. 5 stars, please. Also, you've got my album. It's on iTunes, Spotify, all that jazz. Same thing. 5 stars. Rate, review, do all the things. Support the artists in your life. That includes me. And finally, check out my writing at mindfulofmadness.com. Not posting stuff as often as I would like with the new crazy job, but we'll get more stuff up there soon. Tilde, I've got a cat on my lap right now. I don't know, Tilde, you want to say anything to the people? I don't know if you can hear her purring, but she's purring. Cats like me, not to brag. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. Sorry for being a little aggressive on this on this intro. It's just I recorded 3 podcasts today. I'm all talked out. I don't have a lot of patience left in my life right now. But it's a fun episode. I really enjoyed talking to Wade. I really enjoyed talking to everybody I talked to today, but I am very tired now, and I would like to stop talking. So enjoy this conversation with Wade Ridley, and let me go. Hey, hey, everybody. Welcome to Mindful of Madness. Again, it's me, Andrew, from the intro. And with me this week is a hilarious comedian and podcaster, man about town, a guy who'd been doing this long before I ever started, and probably long after I'm in the ground, because he's got that John Waters energy. I don't think he's
let me tell you.
die. It's Wade Ridley, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on, man. I absolutely appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you for coming on. So we just kind of were gabbing before we hit record, and I was like,
I could talk,
to actually
man.
Start this thing.
Yeah, I could talk.
Yeah, but we're kind of talking about being in sales, because that's something we've both done, and I'm navigating for the first time right now.
And not just sales. It's not like you're like the worst sales that I've ever had to do. Probably was like I probably helped the downfall of Montgomery Ward's electronical division just by being a salesman there prior to joining the military. If you'll notice, Montgomery Ward's isn't around anymore, and this was when computers were first being introduced. So if someone saw a 900 megahertz, nobody knew what the fuck it was. So you could literally make up any excuse under the sun that it's the best fucking number for any fucking computer ever. And, you'd have to be all right selling that to whoever, this Hewlett-Packard piece of shit.
Yeah.
Because Montgomery Ward was not a good place to buy a computer.
No, I can't imagine. There
were
a lot of...
you were doing.
Yeah. It's...
Different world, man. Different world.
It's fucking weird. I mean, like I was saying before we started, I'm not sure this is something I can do forever, but it's something that I have the potential to make a lot of money pretty quickly. And if I can, hold my nose and do it for a year and,
Uh-huh.
get myself into a position where I can get the mortgage paid for a while. And, you asked before we started what I kind of wanted to do. And kind of, I've had, it's the struggle of my generation. I feel like is that I've never had a job I like.
Mm.
You know,
And and a lot of reasons for that too,
right.
because most jobs have bad fucking management.
Hmm.
Most jobs have bad management with low fucking pay.
Yeah.
And if you want a good job, so like for me, when I started making six figures was in Las Vegas, but
Yeah.
the amount of abuse that you have to suffer to be able to sustain that type of pay, especially in the service industry, it could be humiliating to the nth degree. And I definitely learned that wasn't my life that I wanted in Las Vegas whatsoever. But be
Right.
careful, man, because just saying I'm just gonna do it for 6 months, that's how I got a 20-year bartending career, man. That like have an exit
Yeah.
strategy. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
have a path to where you want to go.
Right.
Uh,
Well, and I'm making strides with the art stuff, which
mm.
I mean, I don't need to tell you, everything you do is a long shot. Every single
Oh,
shot
and
you
not only
take.
that, like one of the most important things that was passed down, words of advice anyway, as an artist is, think in decades. Don't
Yeah.
think in this 6-month interval because you'll go mad. You'll go
Oh,
crazy,
absolutely. Yeah.
especially with the ebb and flow of artistry. Who's big news now won't matter in 2 years, and in 2 years maybe you'll matter. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you have to be able to wait that. You have to be able
Right.
to measure your artistry in at least a decade, because you have to build up a body of work.
Yeah.
You come out of the gun, out of the cannon in your first year thinking that you're unstoppable, but you literally have nothing to lean on.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Uh,
I mean, well, and you have to build a skill set too, because nobody's coming out the gate with the first thing, or very rarely,
You fucking
you
stole it if you did. You
yeah,
stole it if you did. Yeah,
right.
I don't know too many comics that have come out of the gate that have been fucking like, here's an hour of my own original thought in my first year, and it's unstoppable.
Right.
It's just, yeah, no, you stole that motherfucker is what
Yeah.
you did. You Dennis Leary to Bill Hicks. That's what you
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. It's
And it happens across the country. Let me tell you, it's unbelievable. Living in Louisville, Kentucky, just in the Midwest, you see how recycled comedy is. So it
yeah.
just, it's a struggle to be innovative.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, and I'll spend a lot of time, thinking, well, is this hack? Is this well trod territory? Like, I mean, I had a joke on my album about, well, what that conversation guys have, which I talk
Hmm.
about it because it's a real conversation, but it's that, well, I wouldn't suck a dick for $1 million. And
Sure.
there are, I could probably
I
pull
think Dane
YouTube
Cook
clips.
comes to yeah, I think Dane Cook comes to
Did
the top
Dane
of
Cook
my
have?
head.
Yeah, I mean, I could
I
probably just,
maybe I
yeah,
want to say I was an avid, before becoming a comic. I was an avid Dane Cook fan.
yeah. He's one of those guys where it's like, oh, he's a comic, so you know who he is, and yeah, I like
Correct.
comedy, so I like Dane Cook, and then you become a comic, and you're like,
Fuck that guy. You
yeah,
start listening. Yeah, yeah. You start
yeah,
listening to like Marin interviews and shit like that. You learn the behind the scenes. It's interesting though, because when I started studying comedy, he is very prevalent in the people that I was studying. And
hmm
I started. Oh man, it's a trip, because later this month will be like my 8th year
hmm
stand-up comedy anniversary, and I took a year prior to doing stand-up to study comedy, just to listen to all of it. That way I can get a good, the history of stand-up comedy, the Phyllis Diller, everyone like
hmm
that. And then you start listening to people that really inspire you. And Patrice O'Neill was a stand-up
hmm
comic that really inspired me. But his whole crew at the time, and this is almost a decade ago now, his whole crew at the time wasn't very well they weren't prevalent. Bill Burr wasn't prevalent. Kevin Hart wasn't prevalent. Like, they were just hitting the cusp. Whereas now, these cats are at the top of the tower. Bill Burr is in The Mandalorian, and he is out acting everybody in it. You know, like, that's just a testament to being on stage every night.
They did kind of lob him a softball of a part there. Woo! Like, oh man, like they knew exactly how to play to his strengths.
Good for him for performing too, because that was an emotional moment where you just had to take a deep breath, Bill, take a pause, and bam, you know, just deliver it. But listen to Jimmy Norton and old O&A shows that are just like outlawed comedy now. Like, you do not go back and listen to any
and
of
I think he's the only part of that show. Yeah, I was never a Opie and Anthony guy, but I think he was the only part of that show that was really interesting to me.
Correct.
Was Jim Norton.
He brought a prevalent perspective. Because Opie always played the dumb guy. Anthony always played the racist guy. And then they brought Patrice O'Neal in to counteract Anthony's racism. And Jim Norton would sort of be the referee in between the two. And it worked flawlessly, you know, for what is now the standard for podcasts. These guys were setting, O&A were setting, you know, Joe Rogan credits the O&A show for his creation. He says, I just want to do an Opie and Anthony show without all the fucking commercials. That's all I want to do. Which is funny because now it's just fucking commercials.
Yeah.
I mean, but, I don't, you know, those.
Yeah.
What's that? Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, you know, and it's like that style of that I don't even want to say it's it's like old bros. Does that make sense? You know,
absolutely.
It's like
it's old guys on the front porch talking shit, you know.
And it's like
construction site workers and whatnot.
Yeah, and it's like that wasn't my window into stand up like it was for so many other guys of my age, my generation of stand up.
Sure.
I feel like because I was kind of sick of it by the time I got out of the army and started.
Totally. You're in the fucking army, man. Yeah, that's your
like,
life 24/7.
If I had heard that stuff maybe a year earlier, like if I'm just thinking like one thing I think about a lot is what if I had gotten into stand-up, I got out of the army and almost immediately got into stand-up. What if I had gotten into stand-up a year earlier while I was still in and had like that entire second deployment where I wasn't doing anything to actually like bone up? And I think then I would have been a little bit more receptive because of the environment I was in. But by the time I got out, I was like comedians of comedy, you know, the weirdos, you know, that Patton Oswalt, anybody Patton Oswalt said was funny, I was like, oh,
the flannel army, man, the flannel army of comics, for sure.
You know, just slacker core.
I didn't start stand up until I was 35.
Yeah,
which I consider to be extremely lucky. Because I have 35 years of experience prior to rely on. So
you had a personality intact before.
Correct. You came in. And I have a voice that's pretty kind of not gonna fucking change, no matter how hard you try to change it. In your 20s, you're kind of susceptible to changing your opinion to popular influence. And or forming your opinion on popular influence. And this happens to young comics like myself. Being a product of that Patrice O'Neal and whatnot study group and whatnot, my first year of comedy was just like, I'm so mad at women. And it took like a whole nother year to graduate from that and start doing the introspection, the self-introspection, and applying my favorite muse or inspiration to stand-up comedy is just pure unadulterated fucking anger. Whenever I'm in that mood, I just start creating and get me riled up on a good Facebook comment thread, and I'll just go out to the garage and start fucking creating some shit, because that's my element, and I know that's my element. It's unfortunate that in these worlds like of stand-up comedy, you really have these 10-minute relationships. Basically, I came up in a different world where, friend groups are cool, but stand-up comedy was a lone wolf game. And in the lone wolf game, like I wanted to be the community person, because when I first started stand-up comedy, there's a group of comics in Pueblo, Colorado that were hungry,
Yeah.
and seeing that hunger just needed organization, and trying to organize it all it proved to be impossible.
Yeah.
And in that impossibility, it blew up, and I sincerely developed the stand-up comic as a lone wolf. I'm just up there on the stage by myself. I have no shield. I have no prop. I'm just here with my words.
Yeah.
And the comic I studied under and I would inevitably tour under for a couple of years was Spencer James, who is also of the lone wolf type of mentality. He really didn't have a home, quote unquote, like a home club or anything like that until he landed in Vegas just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Because he lived on the road.
Right.
Drove his Dodge Dart 250,000 miles.
He's got
drove
like
truck
signatures all over his car, right? That's
I don't know about that. No.
Oh, okay. That might be a different.
No.
I may be thinking about a different.
No, he's
guy.
very clean. Yeah, he just he hit that cruise ship money and bought a brand new BMW. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But it's a very, when you leave the nest, so to speak, and you want to start traveling and booking your own shows in different states and building your own tour and whatnot, you don't have a friend group really to rely on like that unless it's like a contact thing. So like if you and I were to team up, I could be like, all right, I can supply Kansas, Chicago, Louisville, New Orleans, Texas. What can you do?
Right. Like I can get us a couch to sleep on in half a dozen states, but I don't have those contacts.
That's all that matters. That's all that matters sometimes. I took Dan Rainey out on like a hot weekend before, where we hit up Kansas, we hit up Ohio, we hit up Kentucky in like 3 days and then drove home. That type of lone wolf mentality Spencer James possesses, and he has it in spades, and that was the learning style that I came from. So in that lone wolf mentality, I guess I don't mind being an asshole to people either. Especially like you and I had talked about earlier, I came up in that corporate environment of Las Vegas where humiliation is one of their key training tools. Like they humiliate you. I've seen so many people humiliated at the hands of just these rich, snobbish assholes. But the money's so fucking good, man. Oh, the benefits are so fucking good. You get to hang out with movie stars and shit like that, and you're willing to afford that. So, applying the business mentality aspect of it to stand-up comedy when you want to make money out of this, it's just I don't care about being an asshole to people, I guess. Right. The nice thing about being a stand-up comic is you get to choose who you work with too. And I love that choice. I very much love that choice.
And I try to be nice to everybody, but
as you should, man. Especially like if that's your nature and whatnot. But like I said, like for myself, if anyone's had a conversation with me longer than an hour, you're going to find that I'm a fiery individual and passionate about my opinions. I have nearly been fired from Loonies Comedy Corner so many times because of that passion for my opinions. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, what are you talking shit? Are you talking shit to Eric about who he's bringing in?
I've talked shit to Eric. I've talked shit to the other employees, and I'm not doing this as like a symbol of pride. I'm just a very passionate, angry fucking person. And unfortunately, one of my flaws is I may not always be right, but I have never been fucking wrong in my life. That's my flaw. And I know that's my flaw. And the second that combines perfectly with my second flaw, I love the sound of my voice. So when I love my third flaw being arguing,
Yeah.
debating, you know, all of those kind of swirl into a perfect pattern in a workplace
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
So I don't mind being passionate about my opinion. I don't mind being passionate in defense of that opinion, and I also don't mind being proven wrong. You just have to be able to you have to be able to go through about 20 minutes of bullshit. And then after that 20 minutes, maybe we'll come to some type of understanding. But it takes a hot minute, man, let me tell you. Yeah. But once again, once that happens, I just go start writing because that's creative time. You know, that's my witching hour.
See, I can't, for whatever reason, and I thought early on, you know, because you have all these perceptions early on of how you're gonna. It's like, you know, I've always been a writer. I want to write books and stuff, but you know, being a loving, you know, Hemingway and, you know, all of those writers, a young.
I wish I could write as much as you. I wish I could put as many pages.
I'm not doing it as much right now because of the fucking job, man. But you
sure,
like it.
Sure, transitions.
Sucks. It fucking sucks because I have 3 projects. I have a collection of short stories, a novel, and a novella that are all within 10,000 words of being done. And it's like I have to getting more than 500 words on a page at a time right now is goddamn impossible.
Yeah.
And it's like I was so close before I started this new job. If I had waited 3 months, I'd be done.
Sometimes you need it though. You know, it's something.
Yeah, it's just frustrating. And it's like and going back to like what I'd kind of like to do versus like who knows what's possible. But if I have 3 things just about ready to go, if I stagger how I release them the right way, you know, because I've been putting up the short stories myself for free on my blog. And I'm very glad I did that because it gave me a schedule and it gave me like a
which you've stuck to. You've done a great job
for the most part. Yeah, I and I'm very happy that I did that. It's just not something I can do right now. But if I can, I haven't decided whether I'm going to scrub the blog or just leave them up there and then just because not that many people read it. I'm not that worried about it.
Substack's a new big wave going on now too.
What's that?
Substack is what it's called. Independent journalists have really started latching on to Substack. It's basically their way of breaking free of the New York Times and breaking free of, you know, the Washington Post. So one cat that I follow on Twitter, Seth Abramson, has started posting, you know, all of his articles to his Substack, which is a subscription service.
Yeah, I like how that guy just releases articles on Twitter. That it's like
300
so
here's
this article I wrote, and it's all in tweets.
And I've read all of his books, and you're just kind of like, Jesus Christ, man! I wish I could keep up with you. How do you even type all of this?
I think he's a very smart man, and while
Fame's a hard bitch to deal with too, man.
Yeah, he's. I think he would. Coming from journalism, it's hard for me to like because I respect the work he's doing, but I also feel like, man, this guy needs just one regulator. He needs a goddamn editor.
What a good, you know what? It's interesting you bring that up because there's parts of his writing that I hate. Whenever
it's not even that he's a bad writer; it's that he spins off.
Well,
makes
when
assumptions
I see the words,
that I'm not comfortable with.
Another wise piece of advice that got passed down was people that use the words "I," "me," or "my" all the time in their writing have they should really have an editor.
Yeah.
And Seth Abramson, he uses those words quite a bit in those threads, which kind of always pull me down. But he's also trying to promote at the same time a new type of journalism, metamodernism, I believe is what he's calling it, which is a new way that people are essentially taking in information now. They're not reading article, you know, they're not reading a 5,000 word article to take in this information. They're reading a 300 comment thread.
Yeah.
And he's trying to basically put forth that information in the quickest way possible on those 3 comic, which, as you detailed, can miss some fucking details as well.
Yeah.
And having someone edit that is, you know what? I never thought of that before, Andrew. That's a good fucking point, man. I'm
Yeah.
gonna look at that through that lens.
Yeah. I like him a lot. I think he just needs like he needs somebody to read it and say, okay, you're making an assumption here, an assumption here, which it's, I grew up, I grew up in the church. And so one of my,
Same. Yeah.
but like you're hearing a sermon and you've got this very smart man who spent a lot of time with his subject, the Bible, his subject material. And we're dissecting one verse, and you're extrapolating everything this verse could mean. And it's like, bro, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but that's not what this is about. You have to take in the context.
Well, yeah, I literally have demonstrable evidence of everything counterfactual to what you were just saying. Like, I started experiencing that hardcore. I came up hardcore church, and it's amazing to me how many stand-up comics were also hardcore church people in their youth.
I think I just like, not even talking about like the anti-authoritarian like stuff that comics typically gravitate towards because of that. I think one of the reasons is because we went and saw somebody talk for an hour every week. You know, I just think that's part of it.
What an interesting point. So my background in comedy is theater. I was a theater kid my entire my very first like performance, I guess you could say, was at Elitch's at Santa's Workshop, where I made myself the fucking star at like 4 years old. But I've always been in theater since, and I've always had huge acting opportunities that I turned down. Like earlier, my like 18, I turned it down and then joined the military. I had a huge acting opportunity. Yeah, I know, right? Good job, Wade. But I've always been in the theater. I've always loved being an actor and being on stage, and I've always loved stand-up comics. And I know everybody says that line. I've always loved stand-up comics, and as you should, because fuck, they're great, man.
Yeah.
But I've always loved political stand-up comics too. You know, so Lewis Black he was one of my favorite comics coming up. Yeah. A ball of rage, just yelling rage is all that man was. Dennis Leary, you know, I loved his rage coming up. So those angry comics, which I don't want to say are taboo right now, especially that male rage angle, you know, like that's not it's just an overplayed angle for sure.
Exactly. Like it's not that it can't be done well, because
Ben Roy does.
Bill Burr is still doing fine. You know, like it's not something that's going to go away.
Very true. Kevin Hart yells a lot.
Yeah, it's not what's sexy at the moment.
Well, and I appreciate that because John Rumry, the other night we were doing a Loonies thing, and John Rumry comes up and he's like, you know, it's always ballsy that you decide to do smart humor in front of dumb people. And I laugh because that's the same thing I get told when I'm in the Midwest, like Kansas and shit like that. But we all have a blast, man. And that rage aspect that I try to put in my writing and I communicate on stage, I try to do it in a more animate way as opposed to a yelling rage way. Right. However, and I'm gonna say this, Derek Stroop is fucking funny, and Derek Stroop yells every sentence of his whole fucking set. He is hilarious. He is fucking hilarious. But I don't know anybody that could be anybody else that's gonna be Derek Stroop either. You know.
Well, and I'll say this for what you do. You understand the craft to the point you know you don't start your set off that way. Like you might at a open mic or whatever, but like on a show you have, and I would say you have a very effective first 3 to 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
You know exactly how this is going to go every time.
Yep.
And then you get to do whatever the fuck you want afterwards, because you've earned their respect. But I've watched you and honestly thought, oh, I've heard this joke from Wade so many times.
I know, man.
But like the audience loves it, and then by the end of your set, it's like, fuck, Wade is so funny. God
it's
damn
the
it.
new so it's more of these guiding principles, quote unquote, on the road. When you're up there, if you're featuring on the road, you got 20 to 30 minutes, and your first 5 minutes needs to be able to grab everybody's attention. And my opener, unfortunately, is about a good minute and a half to 2 minutes. But it fucking works. And it works everywhere, and it is the perfect setup for any new material that I know is gonna fucking suck coming right after. I need this material to have a shot, though. So I always put new material after something I know is funny, and my opener is hilarious. So I just go with that, put in the new stuff, end with old stuff, get off the stage. Don't go over my time, because I will be chastised by everyone if you go over your time, as you should be.
Don't do that.
There's comics that love doing that shit, man.
Different
world.
And I would say everybody does it from time to time on an open mic.
Sure.
And whatever, I get it. You're feeling it. You aren't taking the set very seriously.
Sure.
You're high or drunk or whatever. But
one of the there's great. So there's no Pueblo comedy right now, which I hate. Like, there's not really a stand-up comedy.
There's some stuff going on, but I get what
there's not a scene. We want there to be a scene, but we don't have an official place.
Is wild. When I started, that's what was happening. There was nothing in the spring.
Because people were putting fucking work in. And when you started, I was booking, I believe, between Colorado Springs and Pueblo, I was booking 7 different rooms. And once the old podcast, so my original podcast was 719 The Blocks, that got blown up because it was PBS came to Pueblo and did a special on Pueblo, and then highlighted my podcast because of it. And then I got airtime. I got like 2.5 minutes of airtime on PBS Voyager, which is an international show. And from there, the producer of that show said, "Hey, I'm starting a new show. I want you to be the host. So I need you to put your podcast on hiatus, and then from there, put together like an audition reel where you interview people, come down to Georgia, and try to move on and be the host of the show." I got to the 3rd highest level, which is broadcast, before you get to the main people, and I ended up losing out to a chef from Georgia, from what I understand, which is fine, but that showed me that I needed to leave Colorado and go
you
learn.
Took off for a while.
I was gone for years. I was gone for almost 3 years, and I moved to Louisville, Kentucky, which I wish I could have capitalized more on, but the reason I moved there is because I was just going to do graphic design and promotions for my friend's coffee shop, which by the time I got there had started to go under. So since literally my job in the service industry has been in ownership or managing partners, and half of that has been rescuing failed businesses, bars. So I used all of that knowledge. We made a new coffee shop profitable, and then from there we sold it, and then I took that chunk of money and then came back to Colorado. But while I was there in the Midwest, Louisville is close. Louisville is the perfect spot for any stand-up comic. And the reason I say that is because it's geographically speaking, 2 hours away from everywhere. It's 2 hours away from Cincinnati. It's 2 hours away from Bloomington, Indiana, which if you're a stand-up comic and have not been to Bloomington, Indiana, where they do the Limestone Comedy Festival, you're failing. You should really go and just check it out.
I got family
Cincinnati,
in Indiana, so I should. There's not really an excuse
literally,
for me. Yeah.
literally go to Bloomington, then go to Cincinnati because that's an up and coming scene. Then go to
Yeah.
Columbus, Ohio, because the largest comedy bookers, the Bowers, the people that book like all of the corporate and 250 comedy rooms across the country, you get to audition for them. And if you fail, you have to wait 3 years before you're allowed to audition again. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
You don't really have these opportunities here.
Yeah.
Then if you want to go south, you're going into Tennessee, you're going into St. Louis, which is so much of a good scene too. There's a lot of exposure living in that Midwest area, man. And I wish I would have been able to capitalize on it more, but I was trying to save a business at the same time.
Yeah.
But once we sold it, taking that money, come back to Colorado, the scene changed, man. It outgrew me completely. You know, being gone for 3 years and then coming back, which is what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know, although there wasn't one in Pueblo anymore when I came back.
Yeah. It was this weird thing because I think when I started, a few other people started at the same time and stuck with it. And then for a very long time, you'd get one or two more comics showing up every year, and they'd hang out for 6 months, and then they'd bail because they'd realize, if you don't love doing this for nothing, there's no reason to keep doing it. You have to accept that nothing will ever happen, and
I hate saying this, but one of the funniest people I know, Dan Rainey, has taken that line. You know what I'm saying? He knows that the work that it takes.
Yeah.
And even at that, it's going to take 15 years before he makes as much money as he does now. You know,
it doesn't help that Dan has a very good job.
Yeah. You know, and he's one of the funniest people I know. He's one of the I love Dan.
Well, and it's like Casey Fraze is probably the single funniest person I know personally.
Great fucking call. That's a great call. There is no better person to have on your roast than Casey Fraze.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's the pound for pound, the single most talented, funny person I know. And
so goofy. I love you, Casey. I hope you're listening to this.
Well, I had him on the show. It's weird because I had him and Jordal because, you know, they're in Stick Horses together.
Sure. That's right.
I had them both on the show, and I honestly think it's the funniest episode I've ever done, for sure, in large part because Casey was there.
And Jordal his laugh is so fucking goofy. It goes from like this bass pitch to this high screech within 3 seconds. Jordal, I love you too.
And having them on together because they work together so often and they're in sync was just magic. And not that many people listened to that episode for whatever reason.
You know what? So with 719 The Blocks, it took about 25 episodes before we got into the thousands.
Yeah.
And then it took about another 50 episodes before we broke 10,000.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to do that. Like it took like 2 years before that. So with the Watchmen podcast now, our numbers hover right at like 1,500 to 2,000.
That's
listeners.
Great. That's a hell of a lot better than I'm doing. You know,
we've kind of plateaued there for the past couple of months, like 2 or 3 months. That's just where we hover now.
Yeah.
So we're trying to, kind of break that next wall, because once you break like 2,500 regular listeners, you start to get a little bit of money, like $60 a year or some shit like that.
I think I've made about $8 on
I haven't even tried to monetize yet. Like I could try to put the advertising on and everything, but I need to leave the Podbean. I'm on Podbean and I need to leave that.
I'm doing Anchor, and I don't know I know it was easier than Libsyn. That's all I really know. And there are kind of some built-in, which may not be the best way to do it, but there's some built-in marketing opportunities, like
hey man, if they're gonna pay you, do it. Take that money.
It's nothing. It's it's really nothing. But I'm getting more views on YouTube than I am on
good.
Well, but YouTube doesn't pay you anything either. So
no, but it is obviously Facebook's number one. Like
Yeah.
Facebook's unfortunately the number one platform where you can get anything out.
Right.
Number two though is YouTube, and younger generations are on YouTube more than they are on
Mhm.
Facebook. And if I gave a shit about TikTok or Instagram or anything like that, then I might apply some energy towards it. But as of right now, I am at my technological limit when it comes to, or at least this podcast. So the new podcast, the Watchmen Podcast, is a movie podcast,
Yeah.
and it's not like I'm not the main part of it, which I love. The co-host Tino Pacheco is, because he writes for Fangoria, he writes for
Mhm.
Screen Rant, he writes for Horror Geek Life, which are all he's got a lot of horror.
They're well
movie
respected. Yeah.
Yeah, they are, and he gets paid by these people to fucking write articles for him.
That's
Which,
awesome.
god damn it, I wish I could do. I wish I could get paid to write fucking articles for people. That would require me actually writing something as well.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
and the gig nature of it fucking terrifies me.
oh
I've
yeah,
written
man.
I've written 2 or 3 gig work
Oh,
pieces since I stopped, working for the Fort Carson Mountaineer, because
sure.
they don't pay shit, and
No,
I don't have the I did not have the
like
muscle,
startup.
the grind muscle to make it work. I can produce fast enough, but I didn't have the
Well,
whatever.
you'd have to be passionate about what you're writing about the
Yeah.
entire time too, which would just take. If I was writing for the fucking military, Andrew, they would not be getting a good product whatsoever. They would be getting a product where like, we can't print this. I'm like, why not?
Well, and what I had to do was I had to find the right angle, which is I wasn't passionate about most of the stories I wrote, but I was passionate about the people I was interviewing.
Oh, that's good.
And so what my in was, especially my first deployment when I was in Iraq, I realized that because I'd hang out with these groups of guys for 4 or 5 days, on their little on their little cobs or little control bases, and I realized that Doc hadn't seen him in 3 months. The chaplain had come out twice the entire deployment. I was the first new face a lot of them had seen in 6 months. And
Oh,
so what I could do was make them feel important for a little while. Even though nobody read my stories, even though I didn't really
but at
care.
least you took that as a
Yeah.
responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's uber important, especially in the military. And not to correlate what you just put across to a very famous comic artist during the Vietnam War. The man drew comics that were basically truth to power, basically single cell little paper comics that kept the morale of the infantrymen and of the soldiers not only up, but kept them going through the war. They would end up giving this guy an honorary Medal of Honor. They would award this guy with an honorary. Yeah, it was insane because of his work, because he captured that moment of Vietnam and whatnot.
Yeah.
Very important work. And our military experiences are like, when did you join the military?
I joined in 08.
Oh,
I got,
eight.
yeah.
So
So
I
right
was
before the election in 08.
years.
Yeah.
I was 8 years removed from the military before you even joined.
Yeah.
And I was.
Which is what's happening with the guys I'm meeting at the dealership now who are coming in to buy cars.
Uh-huh.
Those guys were in, Syria now. Some of those guys in Turkey when that whole bullshit
Was a
happened
thing. Was
last
a
year.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, what were you doing over there? And they're like, I don't know. We were just there and we didn't know what to do.
For us, it was I served from 96 to 2000,
Yeah.
and there was no war during 96 to 2000. We did fucking nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. And I swear, man, you feel like sort of a fraud. You know what I'm saying? Like an imposter syndrome a little bit, because you're like, I'm gonna change my Facebook profile picture to my veterans picture or some shit like that, and you get 100 likes and shit like that, and you're like, I didn't do shit. I didn't do shit. Because during my time, Central America was a focus. Like it was Central America was a focus, and Bosnia Herzegovina was a focus. Bill Clinton dropped more bombs in '96 on Bosnia Herzegovina than had ever been dropped during like all of like history at that point in time. We didn't do man-made fucking go into Iraq war anymore, and then it started again after 9/11. And so it's interesting for me to always talk to post 9/11 soldiers as opposed to pre 9/11 soldiers.
Right.
Our basic training was completely different. Just like less than a decade, our AITs, just the way we trained and functioned, all completely different. Who we thought were the bad guys were completely different.
Yeah.
Even though my unit had come fresh off an Iraq thing, we were all focused on Central America, Guatemala. We were focused on everything down there. We were not focused on sandboxes and shit like that. And now, man, I was an engineer. I was combat engineer, and I wish I would have had your MOS, man. I wish I would have had your job, being able to just go in and see that world, I guess.
Well, it's kind of. Well, I'll say this: the combat engineers were the most fun to go out with.
Oh, that's fun. That's good. That makes sense.
Because like they're combat arms guys. They do all the hua shit, but they don't have the pretension of or artillery. Tankers are douchebags.
Just the tankers. Yeah, sure.
But like. Combat engineers are, and I can't speak to what they were because the mission was a little different back in the day, back before IEDs were a thing we worried about.
Oh, right.
But
that was my thing. Yeah.
Their job was to go try to get blown up, essentially.
That was literally my job. Yes. And they didn't need in that tricky fucking recruiter didn't mention a fucking word, not one goddamn word about it until I got there.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And like EOD was not a sexy job until 2003.
All I saw until the Hurt Locker came out, right?
Well, I was already out. I mean, it was because like it was inside the military. These guys are badasses.
Yeah, but Queen of Battle and whatnot.
Prior to the invasion of Iraq, because IEDs weren't a thing in Afghanistan at first.
No.
But after the initial invasion of Iraq, when they started like throwing shit at us that exploded, that's when suddenly this weird job that was mainly just deactivating unexploded ordnances on ranges suddenly became
that was literally
the most hardcore job you could have.
Like I would ask my instructor, because I trained with the Seabees in Gulfport, Mississippi. That was the base, and did all type of crazy shit down there, right? But I'd be like, what if we don't have this equipment? Like, what if we don't have any of this like metal detecting equipment? He's like, you better shut your eyes and stick your foot out. Fuck, man, you can find that mine. It was not a sexy job. The only way I got recruited is because you got a combat MOS bonus. Like you got a cash bonus for that shit. And that's all my eyes saw, because the GI Bill wasn't shit. Like it didn't get the teeth really until after 9/11. After 9/11, they're like, pay for it all. Up the amount of money that GI Bill was. For me, it wasn't. Like I just took straight cash for the cash bonus. And then thank God there wasn't any war, because that cash bonus was fucking gone in like a month, man. Like
I got I'm a very disorganized person, and I was much worse in my early 20s. I didn't collect all of my bonus until I was actually out processing.
No shit.
Yeah, I got $8,000.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, well, everybody, like truck drivers, I got offered 88 Mike with 40 grand. And I said, no, I want to be public affairs. I want to be Ernest Hemingway. You know,
Yeah.
I want to be
Yeah.
Hunter Thompson. I and they
It'll be Joker from fucking Full Metal Jacket.
I wanted to be
man.
Joker from Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There you go. Have a peace sign on your fucking helmet.
Well, that would have gotten me. I was at Division. I was with the Generals. That would not have.
Oh, that would have gotten you fucking Article 15 his ass and get him back to private immediately.
I would have been fucked up if I'd done shit like that. But also, nobody was getting drafted. There was a lot more like leeway. You know,
very true. Very true.
When guys were getting drafted because they didn't. That was the only way to keep them moving forward was to let.
So where all did you go then?
I went. So I was stationed at Speicher, which was northern Iraq. The division was in charge of everything north of Baghdad.
How long?
And then Baghdad had its own little. Baghdad was its own thing, and then southern Iraq had a different division in charge of them. So we were in charge of all of northern Iraq. I spent half the deployment on Speicher, following generals around, wanting to kill myself.
Fuck that.
It was really bad. What
were you doing? Just following them, or were you like a driver or something for them?
No, I was following them around. I was doing ceremonies. I was editing a lot of stories that the brigade were sending up to us. I was designing this this newsletter that we put out that nobody read. I was going to meetings that my bosses were too busy for, that I was not qualified to be at.
I was gonna say, what your own army over there, Ingram? Is that what you're doing? Your own general now?
But that was half the deployment, and then the other half, I was actually in the field. I was going because we had 3 or maybe 4 brigades below us, and all of those were run by guys who, because there are only like 3 public affairs guys and 3 or 4 public affairs guys in every brigade.
I'm gonna say, I don't need too many.
But they were either brand new privates and then their bosses had also all reclassed. It was just the way it worked. So there were these staff sergeants and sergeant first classes who didn't know how to do their jobs.
And they would just, that's what the Air Force does.
Little specialist Ingram down there to teach them how to write. And so I would go down there and I would hang out for a month or, a couple weeks or whatever. And I would go out.
How many people hated you? Be honest. How many staff?
For the most part, the place I spent the most time other than Speicher was Fob Warrior in Kirkuk City. Okay. And I fucking I wish I had spent my whole deployment with those guys because they were, they were out doing missions. They were doing cool stuff. We were in a city, but they also had guys out on the Turkish border in Kurdistan. And so I was from there. I was teaching those guys, and they were very receptive to what I was showing them. And then I was getting cool missions from them. They were tasking me out to go do actual cool stuff. But then I had to go back to Speicher, and I was just all my uniforms were trashed because I'd been in the dirt, and I was getting yelled at because I didn't look pristine in a goddamn war zone. I one of the few, well, maybe not one of the few people, but in Full Metal Jacket where Joker wanted to get out in the shit.
Yeah.
I wanted to get out in the shit, but only so I could get away from Division, not because I wanted to go get shot at.
For anybody that doesn't understand, having to be around generals every day is like having to be around basically the president of the goddamn United States every day. You do not make an error. You do not make a mistake because you are representing whatever general that you're following around. Mm-hmm. And if you are the specialist who's the fuck up that decides to scuff the general's shoe. Guess what, motherfucker? Guess what? You're going to go clean the latrine for the next fucking 3 years and the rest of your fucking deployment. Like,
Yeah.
it's a vindictive, they're vindictive old men. They're vindictive old men is what they are.
I would even say I got along better with the generals than I did with like my immediate supervisors. And like, you know, I would, and preface this by reminding everybody what I said at the beginning of the show. Everything that made me a good writer made me a bad soldier.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great.
So, but like I'm a goofy guy. Like I'm not cool. I've never claimed to be.
So what do you want to write about? What is important for you to write about? Like, so you said novel and novella, and what is that like your wheelhouse, or do you want to do anything else outside of that?
I don't think I want to go. I am happy to write nonfiction if I'm getting paid for it.
Okay.
It is not, and I recognize, you know, as a comedian, the opportunities to write commentary type stuff is much more accessible. And if I'm given those opportunities, I will take them because I like getting paid, and I like getting paid for doing art more than anything else.
Yeah, for sure.
But what I enjoy writing is fiction, and what I'm focusing on at the moment is the novella, which is I'm aiming for 20,000 words, so not very long, just something I can throw up on Amazon and say, hey, I wrote a book, read it if you want.
There it is.
And that's kind of I don't even want to say magical realism is what I'm aiming for, but that's kind of where I tend to land.
Okay.
So like it's about a reporter. Actually, it's the first time I've actually written a story about a reporter, but it's about a reporter that is down on. He gets fired. He's kind of he encapsulates all the worst parts of my generation, kind of, in that he has the right politics. He very anti-authoritarian. He ticks all the right boxes for what makes a good person on Facebook. But he's a piece of shit. He's an unethical reporter. He thinks he thinks he's better than everybody else. He's a person of weak moral fiber, and he, out of desperation, borrows money from his dad to go follow a story in Kentucky, where he's like this. His dad's rich, but he hates his dad, and so he thinks he's this class warrior. But he really hates the people, you know, down south. He thinks he's smarter than all these dumb Republicans, and
I can relate, living in Kentucky.
Yeah, you know, and he's trying to track down these drug growers.
Okay.
All these
A lot of those there too.
There's this illegal pot grow, and he finds it because he sees a video of a kid flying on YouTube, and he notices in the background there's all this. He thinks, you know, obviously the video's fake, it's some school project or whatever, so he thinks the video's fake, but he's going to go find this illegal grow, bust it open, get back into, you know, journalism as like a serious writer.
Sure.
And come to find out that kid actually was flying, and there's this compound of hillbillies that have magic up in the hills of Kentucky. And yeah.
So side story, and I don't mean to interrupt because
Go ahead.
I have a bit that I tell on the road, and I don't do it much here because it doesn't fit in the act anymore. But if I'm in the Midwest, it definitely works. Do you know Kentucky has blue people?
Yeah. Okay.
They're actual blue-skinned people.
Okay.
Which has been achieved, no fucking lie, through generations of inbreeding.
Yeah.
They inbred so much that it turned their skin blue, and they live in the hills of
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Yeah.
And it is the dark secret that people there in Kentucky, whenever you bring it up to them, they roll their eyes and they're like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're all probably related one way or the fucking other out there
Right.
too. Anyway, please continue with your magical story. I
Oh,
like where we're going.
yeah. So, I mean, basically where I'm at.
Is
Yeah.
this a young adult type of fiction, or is it more of an adult type of fiction? And the only
It's
reason I'm asking is because my wife she's getting her master's right now in
Mhm.
creative writing, specifically for young adult. She
Oh,
loves writing.
fantastic.
Yeah,
No,
she loves.
yeah, I kind of feel like this is everything I a child of Vonnegut. Everything I write is at an 8th grade level. But the content of the story is probably a bit more adult.
Okay, sure. That's Vonnegut. Here you go. That's Slaughterhouse-Five.
Right.
for you. Yeah.
I and like I could talk about Vonnegut for days, but he is like an 8th grade alien writing about humanity, doing a book report on humanity. I don't think I'm the first person to say that, but that's the vibe I got from him. But
I understand him perfectly. That's why I relate. Yeah.
yeah.
Sure.
So I do write kind of at that level. But I'm kind of writing more, I think, either for the kid in the back of the class who thinks what he's getting assigned is fucking stupid, because that's who I was, in school, or the guy in college who thinks his writing professor is too pretentious.
Which he probably is.
Which he probably is, but that's kind of the where I
So
where I feel
have you always written for the magical part of it, like for the magical part of the fiction? And if yes, how do you not mention any of this in your stand-up comedy writing? Like, or do you mention your powers of magical writing just for your novels and whatnot?
I see that's a hard. I mean, if you listen to my album, it is very nerdy. I there's probably the best.
A lot of your set's nerdy, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, the best joke on the record is probably about the magic school bus. Like I really like Neil Gaiman, and I like how he approaches magic in that he is.
You're talking about my wife here, man. I swear to God, my wife should be talking about Neil Gaiman for sure.
Yeah,
also, the new Sandman, I hope, is going to be fucking awesome, because if they fuck that up, there's going to be
it's going to be really hard to pull off. I am really excited about Gwendolyn Christie playing Lucifer. I think, and the fact that we're giving her the opportunity to do something completely different, but is also just as meaty a role as what Game of Thrones gave her. I am so excited for it.
Yes.
But I like that he is using magic to tell very human stories.
American Gods is fantastic. The book American Gods is fantastic.
It's fantastic.
It uses great visuals. Just the visuals for Miss Nancy. That's the character. Yeah. The visuals.
The Anansi Boys is also very good. The book about Mr.
Oh yeah. The next book. Yeah. The wife has them all, man. She fucking loves Neil Gaiman. That's her wheelhouse.
I'd say he's probably my favorite living writer.
Okay.
But I appreciate. I grew up reading Star Wars. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff, all of the box ticking nerd shit.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
But what I'm attracted, but I also like Hunter Thompson. I also like Hemingway. I appreciate
novels.
What's that?
Did you read a lot of graphic novels?
Not until I was an adult.
Okay. There's
so
one specifically called Transmetropolitan.
yes, yes, I
It's
really
a
like it.
graphic novel series about a techno journalist basically that's
Yeah,
unraveling everything. Like, it's on DC. If you guys haven't read it out there, find it because it is a great. You're the way you're talking reminds me of the main character from
yes,
Transmetropolitan.
Spider Jerusalem.
That's a great fucking name, man. Oh my god, great god. I totally forgot his name. That's hilarious.
Yeah,
You're reminding me a lot of how he's speaking because when that was written, it's very prophetic to what it is today.
yeah,
And how he speaks on it would be very much a truth to power type of scenario for today.
yeah. And I would say Transmetropolitan is one of the only like cyberpunk graphic novels I actually like.
Mm,
You know, like
mm.
I William Gibson's another.
Oh, that's a good call.
You know, I don't want to say William Gibson's an influence in that I can't write the way he writes because I don't. He's smarter than I am. Uh, I can't.
Brad this.
He's and listening to him talk about how he writes almost prophetic fiction isn't
Oh yeah.
that he's in the tech world. He doesn't understand tech. He understands societal trends and he sees what's important to people and figures out, okay, if this is what's important right now in the world, that's going to lead to in the future.
Then leading into the obvious question, are you a Philip K. Dick reader then as well?
Yeah, I will say I am not as well versed in him as I am in say Vonnegut or William Gibson, but
Sure.
I
appreciate his movies.
yeah, I mean, I've read, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I've read Man in the High Castle.
Yeah, I watched the movies. The movies led me to the books for sure.
Me too. I mean, look, I'm 33. Yeah. The movie was out before I was born. I definitely watched it before I read the book.
Right.
I was really intimidated by him for some reason. I avoided him because I was afraid I wouldn't understand it for a long time. And,
well, there's a lot to, especially when you get into some of his non-technocratic books, not like mushroom tripping, like I got hit with the acid fucking books and shit like that. He definitely takes on different aspects of, deeper human emotional trends, I guess you could say, for sure.
Yeah, I think Man in the High Castle is fucking fantastic.
It's a beautiful work.
I think it's one of the best pieces of American fiction.
Cool.
I have started A Scanner Darkly, and I've only read a couple chapters.
Sure.
It's like I really, really want to be into this. I think he wrote it in the mid '80s, and there's just
on my back end
a lot of very like '80s centric parts of the pop culture in it are kind of turning me off, which is a stupid reason not to read a book. But
hey man, having lived through all of the 80s, but as a very young child to a very adolescent child, there's a lot to forget about the 19th. As much as there is to love, there's as much to forget, I assure you.
So what kind of stuff would you like to write?
So I do write. I have a plan of a 10, I don't know about 10. It's basically a 10 story book or maybe a 5-story book. Each story is about 10,000 words a piece.
Yeah.
Which is half truth, half fiction because, by the time you're 43 years old, which I'll be in a couple of months, you have probably lived a lot of different lives. Yeah. Your military experience, Andrew, who you were, Andrew, during the military and who you are now, Andrew, are two totally different people, two totally different lives. And the same for myself. And I've had a lot of experience in a lot of different places in this world. I was a professional vagabond long before I became a stand-up comic. I never really stayed anywhere longer than 3 years. I just kind of jumped everywhere. And I had great careers, and I had weird careers. I was in the behind the the ropes, the velvet ropes of Las Vegas. I was behind the scenes of that, enjoying all the perks of Las Vegas that you would only read about in movies and see on TV, and I loved it. And then I went from that to being basically broke and working at I'm not lying, transsexual stripper whorehouse
You talked
right
about
off.
this on stage. Yeah.
Yeah, I've developed that bit now to where it's clean, because when I put it on stage in front of you, it was still raw.
Yeah.
And now it's clean. It's my closer, and it's a God honest, truthful story. And it was an insane 18 months of my life working. It's closed now. And if you want to know what it is, it's the place is called the Harem, and it's a part of Dixie Divas, and both of these places are closed now. And Dixie Divas can be seen in a movie called Welcome to the Ripleys, which stars James Gandolfini walking into a strip club and finding Kristen Stewart there trying to give him sexual favors for $240. Well, that's all based on true life information of what that club actually charges, and I know that because that's what I charged people could go have sexual favors upstairs with there were not Kristen Stewart like girls that work there. The girl that Kristen Stewart is based off of, her name is Haley. She is batshit crazy and on meth most of the time. So there are 3 type of girls: drug addicts and or it was like the stripper graveyard. So it was like this was the hospice for the strippers of Bourbon Street. And then it was for transsexual strippers as well. And my word of advice when it comes to like this whole story is like visually inspect wherever it is you'll be working, prior to taking a job, because LinkedIn is just as shady as Craigslist. And this whole story is basically around that. So, that life is different. And I wrote about that. And I wrote about some military experiences. And I wrote about some Las Vegas experiences. And they get good reception because I know the stories are good, and I've told the stories over and over and over again whenever it comes to these topics and whatnot. Like Las Vegas stories all sound unbelievable when spoken out loud. You write it down, you're like, this is gold. As soon as you speak it out loud, though, you're like, this is not fucking believable. Nobody believes it. But that's Las Vegas, especially. The company that I worked for doesn't exist anymore, but when they did, they were partners with Leonardo DiCaprio, and it was a VIP central. It was literally the time I lived in Vegas as well was like one of its last great heydays, because I lived there right before the financial collapse. So it was having this peak, the financial collapse hit, and Las Vegas just fucking sank. And then we all left. Everybody left Las Vegas. I moved away from Las Vegas to New Orleans at the financial collapse. Had to find, I lost $100,000 a year job, and then went to fucking New Orleans, and did not make $100,000 a year working in New Orleans. However, I was there when the Saints won the Super Bowl. I was there for that season, and holy shit, was that an insane process of watching the Saints win the Super Bowl. Because I was I was working in a fine dining restaurant the night of, and it was one of the only businesses open on Bourbon Street at the time because everybody else was watching the game. And it went from batshit crazy to batshit crazier to everybody loves each other at 5:00 in the morning when we're vomiting on everyone. It was an insane experience, but that's what I write about.
I vomited that night. I remember because they beat the Colts, and
yes, they did.
My buddy and I were Colts fans. I mean, I didn't even watch I didn't watch the game last night. I didn't watch the Super Bowl because I
fell asleep. I fell asleep during the first quarter. I don't even care anymore.
I don't. But at the time, I was in the Army, and so my buddies were, we're gonna watch the game, and it's gonna be great. And
get drunk and riot.
What's that?
Get drunk and riot.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so we watched the game and we're having a couple beers. The Colts lose. We're like, oh man, this sucks. We got to go blow up some steam. We go to this bar, and my buddy's like, we're gonna do Four Horsemen because We
Jim,
deserve to.
Jose, yeah, I know those guys.
Yep.
Fuck those guys.
And it's the Jose that fucks you every time because
Oh,
the rest
yeah.
are whiskey and you're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
You throw some tequila on top of whiskey and
I'm not a tequila person.
Me
As soon as I
either.
taste that
Me
shit,
either.
I'm
and we
all
do
bets are off.
yeah, we do the Four Horsemen and I think at some point I go to the bathroom and I just puke all over the place.
Yep.
And
Start praying to the gods, man. Yeah.
my we're like we gotta go. And my buddy's just blackout drunk and he's like, why we gotta go? And as this shitty 23-year-old or whatever I was, I say, dude, you just puked all over the bathroom. They're gonna kick us out. We gotta go. He's like, I puked all over the bathroom. I'm like, yeah, you did.
Oh, good for you.
It's
Good
such
for you. Oh, that's how you do it, though. If you're gonna throw your buddy under the bus, that's when you do it at that moment in time. We need to get this irresponsible asshole out of here. I am sorry, everybody. That's hilarious. That's quick thinking in a drunken state, man. That normally doesn't happen.
It was such a shitty thing to do. I don't know. Like, I'm not that guy. Usually I'll like own up to my shit, but for whatever reason,
Fuck that. Someone else could take that fall. It's okay. Go clean your puke up. I watched you do it. It was horrible. That was so disrespectful. If I do want to write, I love to write. I just get, here's my thing, and I don't know if you as an artist experience this. Like I said, I know when my creative time is, and when that creative time hits is when I create.
Yeah.
If I try to force myself to create outside of those times, I then become like a petulant child fighting his parent because I told you to do this. I don't know why I have that resentment towards myself when it comes to creating shit, but I shouldn't. You know, I should reserve that for my employer, Eric. You know, like that focus should be right there. Side note, Eric is one of the best people in the world to work for.
Eric, the owner of Loonies. Fantastic.
I like, if you get fired from Loonies Comedy Corner, I don't know what you did. You did something wrong. People have worked for that man for literally 2 decades. So, like, he's a good employer. I am just a snappy motherfucker, and apparently, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Well,
so go ahead. I'm sorry.
Here's what I'll say about maybe one way to look at it, and I don't know if this will help or not.
Please.
But I look at the that creative mindset you're talking about. That's when I develop things in my head. Because I was a journalist, I kind of have a leg up on knowing how to write something because I have to.
Oh yeah, very good point.
You know, so like that. The writing of it is creative, but that is more of a skill than a talent.
Agreed. Yeah.
So like the creative aspect, I if I think of a story, I can enjoy it as a headcanon thing. And then when it's time to write it down, that's the work. That's not and there, you know, and there are those glorious times where that syncs up and I'm doing both
and they
at the same
work
time.
together. Yeah, sure.
But that doesn't always happen, you know, because writing is something you have to like sit down and actually do it, and it takes a long time. And sometimes if you're thinking of something and you have an idea, maybe you can jot down some notes, but usually you can't just
I wish I could type
right
as
then.
fast as I could think. Yeah, I wish I could type as fast as I could think. It's a skill that I decided to skip out on in high school and watch the O.J. Simpson trial instead. That was the hour that they showed the O.J. trial was during typing class. So I would just clock out and watch O.J. testify. That was, you know, long life lesson there. Long-term life, it came around and got me in the fucking end. Is what
Well, welcome to the 90s. I can type pretty fast. My wife types faster than I do, though.
My wife, too. I just look at her as like, fuck, I wish, man. I can't, I wish I had enough money to spend on the software for, deaf people or whatever, where I could just talk as fast as I want
Yeah.
and they could just type it down for me.
You'd probably get a crack somewhere. I'd
Yeah, right. That's
I just feel like I stutter too much, and I can't imagine something like that.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same, sure. I don't, then I'd probably get lazy about going back and editing it.
That
And then
would
after I
be-
do write it down, what the fuck am I going to do with it afterwards? You know, I got a
Yeah.
whole 10,000 words about literally having an interpersonal hate fucking filled 30 minutes with Zach Morris. Me and that guy fucking, like, we had a real life interaction I want to write down about. And like, you know, after I write it down and after I put it, like, the self-publishing thing, that's an even more intimidating process.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I
like
mean, yeah, that self-publishing is really intimidating. I will say, you know, I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole on they're like some writing YouTubers I follow and stuff.
mm,
And one of the things they talk about is having a couple things ready to go at the same time, so you can
multiple
if you can
content.
put out your first book 1 month and then your next book a month.
Build momentum.
Later.
Yeah, have some momentum rolling.
Yeah.
But even talking about that, that's a lot of work, man.
Yeah.
You're talking like, so my mindset, you know, I mentioned earlier that thinking in decades is for stand-up comedy anyway, build that body of work to put out. Like for stand-up comedy, I know people that like they put out new material all the time. You know what I'm saying? Every time they get up on stage, they put up the great, fantastic, man, and I'm happy for you. For myself, though, I'm trying to build a body of work of material that I know that'll work in California and I know will work in New York. You know, like if it can work coast to coast, that's my goal.
Yeah.
And within that, I attack comedy, you know, differently through that aspect as well. Realize that whatever I'm talking about right now is going to look way different. Hopefully, in 3 years, you know, like in 3 years, it'll be different. It'll be a different mold.
Yeah, it's challenging because grinding, there are bits that I will work on and they won't work and they won't work and they won't work and finally they work and now I'm done with it and I never want to tell that joke again. And there are other jokes that like I'll hold on to for years and I wish I could tell you why, because
why you held on to them?
Why this joke works? Was it just there was just one great show where it killed and I'm just holding on to that memory or what? But
so I tried to see when it comes to a half hour, you could elongate, you know, and I try to go revisit my old bits and make my old bits new bits, make them funny again. You know, make them add a different tag, add a different line, add something else that I could throw in there that makes this fresh. Because it gets boring talking about the same thing over and over and over again. Also, though, during COVID, like because of COVID, I thank God I repeated the same bits over and over and over again because, you know, you're able, thank God, man, I was able to get back up on stage last week and not miss a beat. You know, like I haven't been up on stage for 6 months. I didn't miss a beat, put down 15 minutes, and that I went over my time, man. I went over my time. I wasn't able to finish my tranny story, and I had to get off the stage. I was pissed.
Yeah.
But I do, you know, that's it helps. It helps. Add tags, do something, you know.
I've had some shorter sets in the past 2 or 3 months, but you know, not a lot. God, I feel like I would get more out of doing 20 minutes one time right now than I would after or more than a week of 10-minute sets. I really feel like I just want to be able that was of the many terrible things about doing comedy at the Dab Lounge. You know, just the shit, everybody being too high to laugh, just the whole vibe there being so bleak.
Oh, wasn't that a challenge, man? For sure.
But
for sure, a challenge.
But for a while, and this was really important when I was new and I wasn't funny anyway, that I could just go up there and talk for 15 minutes, you know,
right.
you know,
I
and for a
literally
while,
never had that.
yeah, they had an open mic every day. So
Oh,
just
that's
and
yeah.
no,
Ben didn't give a shit.
no, it's just
Nope, Ben didn't give a shit. Just go up there and do 15 minutes. Who gives a shit? That's so
yeah.
funny.
There are three of us here. Who cares?
It's funny because like in Louisville, while I said every comic should move to Louisville, the comedy scene itself there is like not very strong. They have a club there, but it's like trying to rebuild because it got bankrupted by a very famous comic, and I'm not going to mention that here on this fucking podcast. His
The
name.
show that nobody listens to. I think you're fine.
Yeah, right. It got bankrupted by. Well, it's funny because like you find out how small of a world stand-up comedy really is. You know, you go out to other states, you find out the 6 degrees on how you know the comics that you're working with, and you try to be very nice about everybody that you're talking about, right? But when this comic's name comes up, both comics look at each other in the eye first. And they're like, "Are you gonna start talking shit first, or should I?" You know. But he's fucking he's famous. Like he's blue check mark Twitter famous, and he bankrupted the club in Louisville. And the bartender in Louisville saved it and has been trying to slowly rebuild it as best they can down there. And Louisville comedy is more alternative comedy than it is stand-up comedy, which is, and they know this is my opinion on it, which is really fucking shitty a lot of the time. And no offense to fucking alternative comics and your gig, but holy fuck, have a point to whatever it is the fuck you're saying.
I mean, you saw what I did for the first year and a half I was doing stand-up. All my favorite comics are the best version of alt comedy, but it's also harder to be a good alt comic than it is to be a good stand-up. And so
what as well though, what today's version of alt comedy is just so experimental as well, to where there's, oh my fucking god, there's another comic in Louisville that just does a lot of performative type. It's just improv. It's performative improv. There's no stand-up comedy. But one of the bookers there, it's his best friend, so this motherfucker gets more time than everybody else, and he gets up there for like 20 minutes and does nothing but like burn a doll's head on a light bulb, basically. And you're like, yeah, let's get into a flow here, guys, I guess, huh? Opening, and also every show there is like 20 comics are on the bill. You know, it just. It's so hard for them to kick off there. But I will say this as well. They have some of the most talented fucking comics in the country. If anybody's listening to this and you don't know who Mandy Mccleavey is from Louisville, Kentucky, holy fucking shit. Be ready. She is hilarious. She is beautiful. And she's like a Cruella de Vil beautiful. She's got this long gray hair, but she's like fucking 30. Like she is beautiful. And she's hilarious. And she is one of the crown jewels of Louisville's comedy scene. Her and the Red Mexican.
Okay.
That's his name. And guess what? This motherfucker is HBO famous. The Red Mexican.
Okay.
Redneck redneck Mexican that lives in Kentucky, and that is his whole vibe. Tours with like Carlos Mencia and shit. Wears a backwards hat. He was like one of the first comics I met. He's too big for open mics though.
Right.
And Tim Northern is the other cat. Tim Northern is like, and this is what Colorado Springs is kind of missing comedy wise. It's a double-edged sword. Because there's no senior leadership in Colorado Springs like there is in Denver. Denver has senior comic leadership, you know, and within that senior leadership, there are standards that are applied basically to all comics across the board. If you're a new comic coming into the fold and you want to stir shit up, okay, but understand that there are going to be effects due to your ripples. Well, in Colorado Springs, there's no real senior leadership.
Yeah.
And because of that, people just do whatever the fuck they want. And while very fucking fun, doesn't mean it's always entertaining. But which doesn't mean it's always good for stand-up comedy.
Right.
So, like, while the Dab Lounge thing is cool, just fit somebody going up there talking 15 minutes, you really have a chance of someone just going up there and talking racist shit for 15 minutes, a business owner.
Right.
And as a business owner, you would look at that and you're like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
In Louisville, Kentucky, they have senior leadership like Mandy Mccleavey, Tim Northern, and Tim Northern was on Last Comic Standing and whatnot. Like, they got some great comics out there as well. Their access, though, is everywhere outside of Louisville. They travel everywhere outside of Louisville.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's something that unfortunately we've had to. Anybody who was a Colorado Springs comic before basically your class, you know, was gone. You hang out for a year, you work Loonies, and then you go to Denver or you go somewhere else. Which is true, I think, in a lot of the country. I think we may never get to the point where we have a great senior leadership because geographically it doesn't make sense to stay. That being said, I may never leave Colorado Springs and I'm never going to stop doing comedy. So, you know, and I don't know that that's true. If I get opportunities and I get to go write movies in fucking Hollywood, great, you know, but if that never happens, I'm not stopping stand-up, right? And so
nor should you.
Nor should anyone who genuinely gets fulfillment from the craft and makes people laugh.
I agree. Yeah.
And it being famous has never been the goal.
No.
And making a living sure would be nice, but if that doesn't happen, that's okay. I would be okay being one of these old heads that, you know, keeps the scene going and, just
so
people reach that next level.
A good representation of that would be like the Boston comedy scene, where there are comics that are in the Boston comedy scene for 30 years, and guess what? They don't tour because they don't have to. You know, Denver is becoming a place like that too, where there's comics that don't have to tour anywhere outside of Colorado because they can make a living touring inside of Colorado, and they can make a good living just being inside of Denver. With Colorado Springs' growth, especially within the next 5 years, and Pueblo's growth, especially within the next 10 years, I think there's real opportunity within Colorado, because the one big draw against performing stand-up, you know, you have a crown jewel like Comedy Works, but there's nothing else outside of Loonies for 8 hours in any fucking direction. You know, like, what are you going to go to? The one place in Cheyenne, the two places in Wyoming, like in New Mexico? Where are you going to go to Kansas where there is no comedy? You know, like that's not true. Southeast Kansas is the shit for stand-up comedy. All right. But like, it's not like you're going to go to Utah. You got to drive to Salt Lake City. You got to go to Las Vegas. That's a 12-hour drive. You know, if you go to California, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, because I haven't talked to Eric about this. I've only heard the scuttlebutt in the scene. But you know, the 3 E's opened up. And I know Eric's kind of like, don't work there if you want to work here. Which I'm not gonna talk shit about Eric's business model.
Sure.
He's a club owner, he's got a bottom line. Do you think that's gonna be a hard line he continues? Or do you
So I will speak to 2 lines of experience on this, and I definitely know where okay, so here's my first experience. As was previously stated in this show, I booked 7 rooms, 3 in Springs, 4 in Pueblo. There's a reason I quit booking in Colorado Springs. One of those is because Eric and I had, there was no booking of Wade at Loonies Comedy Club. I was Eric's direct competition, and I'm booking shows that are a mile away from his club. With legitimate headliners. It's not like I'm saying Wade's the headliner. No, there's a legitimate headliner that could do a legitimate hour that's 45 minutes away from Eric. If you own your own business and you have competition 1 mile away from you, good luck. You know what I'm saying? And that's just a businessman's perspective on the aspect.
Sure.
Number 2, go outside of the state of Colorado, where you go to a place like Cincy, you go to clubs like Austin, Texas, Vegas, California, where if you go and perform in another place, you're actually taking money away from the club because you're performing there, because you have a following that's going there. That club, I mean, in the world of stand-up comedy, if you get big enough, you have to sign a waiver that says you won't perform within 150 miles of said fucking club. So Bill Burr says, I'll perform Denver and I won't perform Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because that's a competition clause is what it's called. Non-competition clause. So if you're a real stand-up comic, guys, and you want to be a real stand-up comic, guess what? If your future is that, you will have a non-competition clause. And if you do go outside of Colorado Springs and outside of the state of Colorado, where there are plenty of prevalent comedy scenes all over the place, good luck.
Yeah.
Because it's called a home club for a reason.
Yeah.
Now, to speak from Eric's standpoint, whether you like it or not, as a stand-up comic in Colorado Springs, Eric has invested money into your development.
Sure.
Eric has provided a crowd. Eric provides a stage, a microphone, and insurance for your loud-ass fucking mouth to say some fucked up shit when you're just trying to figure out if this joke is going to work or not. Eric has invested a lot of that time. He actually pays an entire staff, stocks an entire bar, and pays an entire lease on an entire fucking comedy club so you can get up there. And you take that investment and you go to another place and you spend all of his money. So if I, as a business owner, am going to take this investment of all these stand-up comics, invest my time bringing you up because I'm the only game in town, and I spent all this time bringing you up when I could very easily just bring in any comic for Denver, because that's what Eric did when I was around.
Yeah,
when I was first
that's what he did for years and years and years. Yeah.
Yeah. There were no Colorado Springs comics. Eric didn't like working with locals because we're loud-ass bitches. We complain a lot. Eric would just have Denver comics come down for the same amount of money who are way fucking funnier than all of us at the time. But Eric chose to invest in local comedy. He chose to have open mics when there was only 38 comics and 4 fucking patrons. You know, he chose to keep that investment into stand-up comedy in Colorado Springs and keep it alive when he didn't have to. Now, you're going to take and I'm saying you're, not you as Andrew, but the Colorado Springs comedy. You're going to take that investment and you're only going to go to 3 East Comedy Club. When all you really have to do is go to Eric and say, can I get a guest spot? You know what I'm saying? Put me on the host list. And let me tell you about getting a feature spot there, like an honest to God feature spot there. He has 52 of those a year. That's what he has. And those normally go out to national comics that are headliners normally. So if you're a local comic getting a feature spot, he could more than likely lose money because you're not going to be as funny as a motherfucker he could bring in from New York for the same price. So from the local stand-up comedy spot, if you have a home club, it's your home. When you're in another state, you have a home club. And you are dedicated to that home. Now, you can choose this line of thought and roll with it. And if you don't, that's fine too, man. I understand the other side. You're a stand-up comic. I will fucking do anything for 5 goddamn minutes. I will do anything for 5 fucking... Are you going to let me on that stage? Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. I just rewatched Requiem for a Dream. And I don't know if you guys have seen Requiem for a Dream or not, but there's a mom in that movie who's addicted to crosstops. She's on speed, and she thinks that she's been cast for a game show. So she's so yacked out of her mind that she just shows up into the lobby of this game show and looks at the security and says, I'm just trying to be on the show. That's what it's like as a stand-up comic. Yeah, and I understand that. But guess what? You're in a world of business now, and you're not just competing with local comics. You're competing with national comics. You're competing with comics from Denver that have been doing this 4 times as long than you have, and they'll come down for 0 fucking money because Sam Talent is the headliner and their face looks good next to his.
Yeah, anytime you get to work with Sam Talent, you just say yes.
So you do, right? You do. And guess what? So as a headliner from Denver, I promise you Eric is going to take notes if you're headlining 3E's Comedy Club. Because he doesn't have to have you headline his club anymore, because guess what? I only have 52 of those spots, and there's fucking 5,000 comics to choose from that are all funnier than local comics.
I still think I get what you're saying, and I totally respect it. I'm not like mad at anyone. I'm not.
Oh, no. Yeah, not at all.
My thought though is if you want comics to be good, they need to be able to do as many shows in front of a good audience as possible. So I guess I understand not wanting your features, but if you've got a young comic who's just trying to get a good 5 to 15 minutes, fucking let him work wherever.
Now let's look at what we're saying. It's not, as we discussed prior, lone wolf versus community, right?
Sure.
It's not just a young comic. So if you have like every comedy club across the nation, like Comedy Works in Denver, they have their own group of comics that they work with. You know, if you have made it to the list, the Comedy Works list where they just call you if they need you, congratulations. But you know who else has a list? The Denver Improv. You know who's not on that list? Anyone that's on Comedy Works' list.
Yeah.
And there's a good reason for that. Like the comics that work the Denver Improv, they get to work the Denver Improv exclusively. So there's a group of comics that literally supply a lot of money to the club. At the same time, the club's supplying a lot of stuff for them, including pay, which is fucking nice to have. It's that entire culture that will go to another club. So if Eric chooses to treat local comics like shit, local comics can all take all their money and all their revenue and go hang out at 3E's Comedy Club. And good for them. You know what I'm saying? But guess what, 3E's Comedy Club? You now get to deal with all of these prima fucking donnas that all want your time, and you're going to be over this shit. Because Eric's had to deal with all of us prima donnas for a long time.
Yeah.
He's had to deal with this prima donna for the better part of fucking 5 years, you know? And it would be 8 if I didn't move away.
Yeah. Personally, I mean, whatever any club owner decides to do, you know, it's not really me as a comics business to tell them how to do anything.
Sure.
You know, but personally, I think it's a good thing there's another club in town now. I think it could cause.
For the state of stand-up comedy, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah,
competition is a good thing. And I told Eric this while I was working it.
It's like whatever, you know, it's not like either Eric's not booking me all the time. Eric knows who I am. He gave me a really fair shake earlier on than I probably deserved. And I did not follow up in the way I should have. Like I hosted a weekend there and then I didn't come back for 6 months.
If you did though, so and this
not because he didn't book me, just because I was depressed and I didn't come out. Like
dude, just get in there. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. For sure. Whatever the reason is. Here's what I can tell you about Eric and what I know. And let me bring up this phrase again. As previously discussed on this podcast, Eric is a great employer. Yeah. And if you invest in Eric as a stand-up comic, he will invest in you. Yeah. Case in point. May I bring up Johnny Brotsveen, Brian Sullivan, and Tracy Kellett. These people have invested in his club, and Eric has turned around and invested in them. Yeah. You know, Brian gets a show whenever he wants. Johnny will feature when Eric needs it. And Tracy is up and coming, and they are hustling for Loonies. They are there when he's open. They're drinking at the bar. Yeah. They're going up when he needs it. That's a culture that exists at every comedy club.
Yeah. And it's a culture that this scene has been very bad at. We don't.
Correct. Well,
Yeah.
so, and Eric will admit that when I came up, like John Brown literally tried to start a revolt against Loonies, saying no one should go here, no comic should go here, let's go somewhere else. That's what happened when I came up.
Yeah.
Now, Eric could be a dick and remember that shit forever, or Eric can have John Brown feature at his club.
Yeah.
And Eric did not hold that shit against John forever.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, if you invest in Eric, Eric will invest in you. Now, when I first started coming up, Eric had a problem with local comics. I can absolutely assure you that is not the case anymore.
Yeah.
If you go there and
think
you
we're better now is a good, you know.
Oh, well, that's a very good point, too. Yes, we are much better now. Yes, we're not trying to walk all over the fucking stage. Yes, we do know that you do have to show up by a certain time to get your name on the fucking list, assholes. Don't show up 20 minutes after expecting to get into the open mic, you know?
When there are 50 people on the list already.
Yeah, so like Eric remembers shit like that.
Yeah.
Do not call during business hours when we're obviously busy as fuck and ask for a guest, like ask for a spot, you know. Email the motherfucker during normal like waking business hours, 9 to 5. You know, he is awake during that time. You can email him, you know. If you are persistent, Eric will find you.
Yeah.
I promise you that much. And he will take care of you. And I can only speak from experience as a comic that literally I was essentially 86th from his club because I was his direct competition, and I might have dropped a C-bomb on stage, which is a big fucking no-no in Loonies, and is a big fucking no-no in places like Comedy Works, come to find out, you know. Eric is the one who pays for us to learn that lesson. It's not a good thing to just
like, you know, comic cards get filled out.
Yes, for sure.
At the end of the day, you know, like I am all for free speech. You know, on stage, you say whatever the fuck you want at an open mic.
Yeah.
But if you're making people angry, you're gonna pay a price for that. You can say whatever you want. Recognize that doesn't mean you're going to be rewarded for saying whatever.
100%. So, and guess what? 3 E's will figure you out too. If you're going over there and saying that, 3 E's will figure that shit out quick.
Yeah.
But I do encourage comics, get all your stage time. Just know if you're looking to build alliances, if you don't think that's what you're doing, I assure you that's what you're doing.
Yeah. It just
and that's in every fucking scene.
It just sucks because I have no interest in like picking a side. You know, like I don't care. I just want to be on stage, you know.
In Louisville, I didn't get booked at the club because you had to be a friend of the stand-up comic to be put on stage. That was the only way you're getting any of that. And don't try being a woman and getting on stage either, because he was not about having that shit. It's a different world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I could either not perform at this club in Louisville, Kentucky, or I can drive to Bloomington, Indiana and have a fucking smash. You know what I'm saying? Like, because they got great shit going on down there. So just any comics here, just be very aware of what you're doing, because people are paying attention. If you don't think it happens in other cities, it's happening in Denver. It happens right now all the time. It happens in California, in Las Vegas, everywhere. And welcome now that it's happening in Colorado Springs.
Yeah. Well, and the good thing is, I will say, Eric has chilled he's chilled out on the comics putting on their own shows. You know,
sure. Oh, dude, that used to be
I mean, I want to make that clear because you know, I've run shows on Friday and Saturday nights.
For bringing that up. Yes, thank you very much.
Not at this point.
Here's what else I'll tell you as a comic. If you want to perform at 3 E's and you were to give Eric a courtesy call and say, "Hey, man, I got asked to perform at 3 E's. I just wanted to run it by you because, you know, you fucking invested in me and I ain't trying to screw you over." You know what he's going to say? Go perform. Thank you for calling me. I fucking promise you. He's
I mean,
and I learned that lesson from fucking Spencer James. That was one of the very first things he told me when I was like, I don't know why I'm not getting booked. He's like, well, fucking don't start a show 1 mile away from the fucking club.
Right.
But Eric has gotten way cool about that. Dan Rainey books his own shows at CC. Eric does not care anymore. He does, however, and I would as a business owner too, if you got a great club, man, awesome 3Es, there will be competition because there is a limited talented pool here in Colorado Springs that do have their own following. Yeah. And Eric will fight for that following. Yeah. He will absolutely fight. And if you want to take that following to 3Es, go have fun because Eric's been there for 20 fucking years.
Yeah.
He's seen a lot of attempts.
Well, I think they'll figure out what they're doing. They'll get different kinds of comics. They'll figure out what brings in an audience in their part of town. I think it's the best thing that could have happened. I wish it had happened a year earlier or a year later because we're dealing with COVID and that's
I agree.
Up too.
Yeah. It's not like they give a fuck though, from what I understand. They don't give a fuck.
Apparently nobody does. But
here's what I told Eric I would be worried about is that 3Es doesn't work, that the business itself closes, and that Wendy Curtis in Colorado Springs decided she wants to expand into a place downtown Colorado Springs.
That would be very bad for Eric. Like it might be.
And he looked at me and
for us, but it would be bad for Eric.
Yeah, and
I don't know that it would be good for us because that's mighty corporate. That's not our vibe.
Well, and the unwritten rule is you do not cuss at Comedy Works. Right. That's an unwritten rule. Don't go up there and cuss. I'm not even talking like bad cuss for comics. No, don't go up there and say fuck. Like try not to say that shit because they have so many comics to choose from. So many fucking comics to choose from. They could call a motherfucker in New York, he'd be here tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Hey, Ben Cronenberg, I need you here tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Ben Cronenberg be there tomorrow because that's the type of room Comedy Works is, and that would be the prestige that they brought with them as well.
Oh, and that's Ben's home room anyway.
Yeah, it is.
You know, like in that example at least,
He's a kooky guy too, Ben Cronenberg.
He's I remember first seeing him way back before I started stand up. I was aware of him because he sent Roseanne into a goddamn rage on Last Comic Standing. That
was my introduction to him as well. And if anybody doesn't remember, Ben Cronenberger walked on stage with his phone out and started scrolling through his phone for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and just sighed into the microphone. And then he looks up and says, "What do you guys just start working as soon as you clock in? What the fuck?" And then Roseanne lost her mind. She was not about it. I thought it was so funny. Oh my God.
Well, I mean, and talk about like Ben Cronenberg's a great example of when alt comedy works, right?
Oh, that's a good call. Yeah, that's a very good call. Yeah, he is a very good example of when alt comedy works. And when you ask about him now, he just shrugs his shoulders and laughs because it was fucking funny. And he knows it was fucking funny.
Yeah. Well, and people like you and me were like, fuck yes, that's punk rock. That is awesome. And I think
not that to be the first thing that came out of my mouth as soon as I saw him, like being like, that Roseanne fucking thing. You know, I didn't want to be a little kitty.
Well, you know, and he obviously he didn't win. And frankly, he probably wasn't going to win anyway.
Yeah. No, it was, I think that was Rich. Was that Rich Voss's year? Was that Rich Voss? Was that the year Rich Voss won?
I don't think so. I can't no, that was I can't remember his name. The only other thing I've seen him in is Roast Battle.
Okay. It wasn't Josh Blue either.
No, it wasn't. Well, I know Voss is involved with Roast Battle shit too, but not Voss. No, I can't remember the guy who won that year, but that was the year Jesselneck hosted, and that was maybe the only year that the show was actually good.
Jesselneck's brutal too. That dude is fucking brutal.
Well, and apparently he hated it for good, like, because it's a thankless job, and you're doing it on network television. It's not the best environment for stand-up. That's why that show never really worked. But I would say that year was the closest to it actually being like a very good comedy show.
I'll have to go back and rewatch it. I like watching older comedy takes. I don't watch. So rule of mine, and I'm one of these comics. I haven't watched a comedy special in like 8 years.
Oh wow!
Like,
okay.
because of the actor.
You and John Brown are kind of the same that way. And
Yeah, that's if you'll ask both of us, it's probably why we kind of are rigid towards one another. From the acting background that I carry, mimicking people like their physical, facial manipulations and whatnot.
Right.
Like that's a big part of our repertoire. That's a big part of the thing of being an actor. And if you watch a lot of comics, especially at open mics, you'll see a lot of 20 Louis C.K. hand gestures or Louis Black finger waving, pointing,
right.
or and here's the other thing. I only watched one episode of Seinfeld. It was the very last one to make sure that it was over because it was so popular. I was against it coming up. I have never said on stage, and what's the deal with airline? Like, I've never used that as a setup or anything.
To be honest, I don't even think Seinfeld ever actually said that. I think it's just the kind of shorthand for that kind of stand-up.
Yeah. So because of that, I don't watch specials, especially when you get animated comics like Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart is a very animated comic. He's got a lot of eye work going on, a lot of moving around the stage. Chris Rock, another one, very animated, fiery. If I'm watching these guys, I want to mimic these cats, and I'm trying not to do that.
It's hard because like I just, especially since COVID's happened, I've watched a lot more because I'm not getting I'm just not getting it as often. But like they're just, I find I don't generally mimic their physical characteristics or their I have probably inadvertently structurally taken some stuff.
Sure.
That's just part of being a young, I've been doing this a couple of years.
An artist, when you're first as an artist in any medium, you see something you like. If you're a visual artist, then you try to copy that.
Yeah.
And then you develop your own voice from that, for sure.
Right. And like even I think, and anybody who's done stand up for long enough recognizes that structure is important. And and as long as you are bringing your own thing to it, you can kind of build it on the bones of something somebody else has done.
How a comic chooses to interpret the rule of three, I think, is a good example. With the rule of three is the basic foundation of any comic writing, period. I don't care what it is, if it's stand-up or if it's sketch comedy, the rule of three is where you sit. Exactly. How you interpret that, though, that rule of three is very important to your voice as a stand-up comic.
And if you can, and I think I'm getting to the point where I'm trying to build threes on threes on threes. You have three examples with three smaller examples. And that's something I have. I'm an intuitive learner, so it's very hard for me to talk about structure in an intelligent way.
Okay.
Because I kind of like, I'm good at absorbing things, but I'm not good at reading something and applying something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure, but absolutely.
But like in contrast, one of these things we're talking about, I remember Dana Gould in an interview talking about how he's got a very funny joke on one of his specials where he's talking about how the phrase something is the Beatles of something else.
Okay. Sure.
It's meaning the best version. And that is one of my favorite jokes of all time. I love Dana. It ticks my boxes. Okay. It's about rock and roll. It's analyzing a turn of phrase. It's Dana Gould, whose delivery, for whatever reason, works very well for me.
He is hilarious. Dana Gould is fucking hilarious.
He is one of the fucking best. He's, and it's like, if you like Patton Oswalt, he learned from Dana Gould, Yeah,
absolutely. And not only that, especially when you go to the coasts, like you see his impersonators come out. You see the Dana Goulds.
Well, and
You
I'm
know?
probably, one of them, really, because I'm
Yeah, Colorado.
yeah, yeah, I'm very much in that school of comedy. And but he has this very funny joke about how, well, if the if the best version of something is the Beatles of something, then the Beatles are not the Beatles of rock and roll. The Rolling Stones are the Beatles of rock and roll. And the Who, yeah, and yeah, Keith or
I love that type of comedy too.
yeah,
That's quote unquote intelligent humor, quote unquote. You're
right.
not talking dick and fart jokes or anything like
Right,
that.
which, like, I am happy to throw out a dick joke, but if I can make it a smart dick joke, I feel very good about myself.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And
he just did that whole run, and it's like a 5-minute long bit, and then I hear him in this interview talking about, oh yeah, so I'm really proud of that joke, but I stole it from Richard Pryor, I think. Like it's just his take on a Richard Pryor structure.
and then what else are you supposed to do? And especially now I think as a stand-up comic, that's why personal experience is so important for your writing, because of meme culture today. It's so influential on how we think and how we write comedy. Short little 3-second quips that can hopefully keep everybody's attention for 30 minutes and whatnot. Your personal experience is the only thing that breaks that mold, I guess you could say.
Exactly.
Being able to put that on paper and then on stage for sure is what separates comics, man. Like real comics from just like open micers, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And that's not a break to open micers. You could be one of the best comics as an open micer. I've seen Dan Rainey perform millions of times.
But Dan Rainey performs Twitter jokes on stage.
Yeah.
Like not that he's stealing jokes from Twitter.
No, those are his Twitter jokes.
He writes perfect Twitter jokes and brings.
He's so good at it.
Yeah,
he's so good at it.
Him and John Bueno, man, from very different angles, but him and John Bueno are so good at that short format that works on Twitter and Facebook.
Dan lives there, man. And here's what Dan does. He writes thousands of them. He writes literally thousands of them and then picks the best one of the day to basically post.
Whereas I'll write 3 in a day, post all of them, and one of them is good.
And that's what I do, on those Twitter hashtag games. I'm like, if I see one I like, I'll post 3 of them, and then that's all you get from me. I get paid for anything else after those 3 shitty tweets that you get from me, okay?
Yeah. And I can't lock into that format, so like everything I do is kind of whatever's going on in my head.
We've been talking 2 hours and 15 minutes, man. Yeah. Well, I'm long-winded. I'm not trying to put anything in 180 characters. No.
Speaking of which, we should probably wrap this up because I do have another one in 45 minutes.
Sure you do, man. I thank you so much, Andrew. I've had a blast, man.
Man, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on and talking.
And I'll get you shortly, too, man, to get you on ours.
Absolutely. That'd be great. I don't know when you guys record. Sunday's really my only firm day off, so.
Oh, we can record on Sundays. Whatever works easy for you to make happen, for sure.
Awesome. Well, we could talk about that off mic sometime.
Well, good luck on your next one, huh?
Yeah. Tell people about the podcast and where they can find you and stuff.
I'll put it out for sure. Yeah, I'll put it out for sure.
Yeah. All right, bud.
Thanks, Andrew.
Talk to you later, man.
You too, bud.